Hey, did you hear about the new discovery about what's underneath the pyramids? I mean, this is crazy. What's going on there? Well, first of all, is it even real? But I mean, there are underground tubes, there power generation, maybe there's an underground city. I mean, what is going on? And what am I supposed to think about it as a Christian? Today, we're going to talk about it, so stick around.
Welcome to my take. Well, it's not my take, it's Miguel Crespo's take. Whatever. For inspiration to go.
Welcome to My Take, Pastor Crespo here. My Take is your oasis of inspiration and hope in the desert of negativity and despair. Thank you for being a part of the My Take family. Well, my friends, we are going to get into something that I think you might find very interesting today. That is, if you are a person that's into the weird, the strange, um, that would describe me. Today, I'm going to talk about the subject, but I have found someone who is a kindred spirit. The weird, the strange. I don't know if you call it weird fringe science or fringe tech. I'm not sure. But with me today, we'll figure this out together. I'm here with John Adolphi. He is an excellent realtor, by the way. In case you ever need to sell something in Central New York, John, I'm not even getting paid for that. But want to welcome John Adolphi. Not only is he the owner of Adolphi Real Estate, but he is also the proprietor. Can I call it proprietor of the Lost World Museum?
Sure,
Or
sure.
so he is the one that I go to whenever I have questions that other people might look at me and they might kind of give me a little side eye if I ask about the chupacabra or Bigfoot or ancient technologies. And how did the Mayans build these? How did the pyramids get built with these 1,000-pound blocks? He's the guy that I go to. Noah's Ark. I mean, where is it? Have they really found it? He's the guy that I go to. So today we want to talk about this. John, first of all, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Miguel. My pleasure.
John, can you just tell? You've been on the podcast before, but can
Yeah,
you just tell those who are watching a little bit more about what Lost World Museum is?
sure. Lost World Museum is more of a concept than it is a place to go to. Although we do have a window display next to our office with the hopes of doing something in a more physicality way. But until then, we've been hitting the airwaves, social media airwaves, with short videos, long videos, posts, and whatnot, basically asking the question, where did we come from? And then exploring origins by making a statement, is it, or question, rhetorical or not, is it apes, aliens, or is it Adam? That is Adam and Eve. And so, myself, just right off the bat, I am what they call a young earth creationist. I stand in the footsteps of people like Michelangelo and Sir Isaac Newton and Louis Pasteur. Um, but still, it is not the popular view within the realm of films, education, even in some circles of religious Christianity influence.
Okay. So, I've known those things before, but your description sparked a question that I'm sure we can get into later. But let me just
Sure.
ask you roughly, when we talk about young Earth, um, can you give me a ballpark what you mean by that? When, of course,
Sure.
people say billions of years, but what is your take on that?
So I am not about to have a hard stand on the original water and granite that was here before Creation Week took place. I don't know. But I do know that when life was actually, when it began, it was created in 6 literal days, and then they rested on the seventh literal day after it was over with. And that, the Creator God, namely Jesus, came down and spoke everything into existence instantaneously. And this happened approximately 6,000 years ago. Now, the trouble that some people may have is they're so used to this idea of millions of and hundreds of millions and billions of years that the idea of a 6,000 year timeline just seems so ludicrous, and that there was a worldwide flood 4,400 years ago. But let me just say this. Look how quickly the United States has developed in the last 300 years. And now let's take a look at
Mm.
6,000 years. And it really then begins to put some kind of context on it. That's all I can
Wow.
say. But yeah,
That's a great point. I mean, I just Imagine how far we've come just in a couple
Yeah,
several hundred years. Wow, wow. Well, John, I wasn't planning on asking you this question, but just how did all this come about? Where did you get this desire to look at these things that you kind of
sure.
post about now? What happened? Where'd that come from?
Well, it starts with a foundation of the Bible, and it also the influence of the Seventh Day Adventist Church also had a part to play because, and this is what I didn't know. Almost all of the people, members or whatever of that church, are young Earth creationists. That's not the case in a lot of denominations, and I didn't know this until, well, that's another story. But let me just say this: it was a book called Secrets of the Lost Races by Rennie Neuerbergen. That's Rennie, not Renee. It's a man. And he wrote this book that basically was answering the question of a student that came into his office that said, all this technology and whatnot, did aliens once visit us? Did they really, mess with our DNA and leave us 5,000 years ago with a transcript of or a prescription for technology? Only now, recently, in the last few thousand years, we lost that. Is that true? And what he did was he answered him by talking about the young Earth creationist point of view, which included giant humans, Noah's Ark, and ancient technology and the evidences of it. It's a fascinating book. And that book I read 5 times through the years in the 80s and 90s. And that's what really influenced the whole theme of the Lost World Museum.
Wow, wow. What's the title of that book again?
Secrets of the Lost
I'm
Races.
gonna have to look that one up.
It's it's a really good book.
Wow, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I hope it has a lot of pictures in it.
It's very simple to read and very entertaining, and it's just mind blowing.
Wow, wow. Well, look, there's a reason why I asked you to be on the podcast today, and
Sure.
that is because of what's in the news right now. And so, um, I'm sure you've heard of this. You're the one I was hoping that you could, not only answer some of my questions, but people who are watching the recent discussion about what has been allegedly, supposedly discovered inside some of the pyramids in Egypt. I do have. I want to bring up here just a short vid,
Sure.
and maybe we can talk about it. But they found within the pyramid itself. I think it was the second largest pyramid. I can't remember the name of it right now. They look like little huts, and then of course underneath they found these cylindrical wells, columns with supposedly something spiraling around, which they thought might be passageways that then lead to these larger they look like boxes, but they're supposed to be these large buildings. Can I call it that? I mean, w- w- I- they're saying it might be an underground city there. What have you heard and in relation to this?
Well, I've heard pretty much everything you just said, and I think that the word on the street, as far as to find out what it really is pretty smart. So I'm not making any of this up. But they said that they should immediately, not wait 2 years, because sometimes when the powers to be get involved, the politics of this gets involved, then, especially if those in charge are not too happy about the images that they're seeing and what it possibly could mean, because what it can do is it can really mess up your timetable. It can mess up a lot, especially with something that large and profound underneath the pyramid. And so what they were saying is they need to get a third party in there immediately and utilizing either the same technology or something similar, and do a second test on it to see if they're getting the same results. The other thing they said is you could even forego that second test if you could get permission to do this. And that is
Dig.
just drill a borehole right straight down and see what is actually there. That
Yeah.
would be the quickest way. Run cameras down there, you could run radar down there, and you could take a look around and see what's underground.
Have you done any research into the actual science of this? I forget what it's called now. this underground radar technology, because I was looking at some pictures, and they were showing some of the scans, and they're colored, so it's like there's blue and then yellow and orange, and but from that radar image, then they came up with this, which is this is a computer
Yeah.
generated image, but that's not what it looks like in the radar. So are those? I mean, would that, if they found that, would that be accurate, or is the science of the radar technology suspect?
We really don't know. We
Okay.
really don't know, only because, and listen, I'm not an expert on this type of technology, but I can tell you that those reds and greens and yellows and blues and everything are values of density.
Hmm.
So that's where they get that. It's hard to tell at this point. I think it's premature, but I think it's so incredibly exciting that it had to all of a sudden just take off and permeate,
Yeah.
the media, because of what it might represent. And we can talk about that too. If it is under there like that, what does that all mean?
Right. Well, I guess that's the thing that I find the most interesting. The So I'll tell you what I've heard. You tell me, where I'm right or wrong. There are people that are saying it can be anything because of the fact that it's going down at almost, what, 2 kilometers. Uh,
Yeah.
that's deep. That it's either an underground. It could be an underground city. It could be some type of a power generation system. I believe I was reading somewhere that Nikola Tesla was the one who was known for saying that creating or talking about the wireless electricity, and that this may have something to do with harnessing something in the earth. And but then automatically they go to, well, this couldn't have been built by the ancient Egyptians, so it had to have been built by aliens. And so now you go from one to the other to the other. W- can you talk a little bit about what you've heard they have found, and
Sure.
what that may mean as people think about it?
Yeah, I'm excited. I know they're talking about 2 kilometers, but I'm excited because it's not as deep, but still deep enough. Those columns are 600 yards. Um, was it 600 yards? Yeah, 600 yards, I believe it is. Not 600 feet.
Okay.
600 yards, and that's pretty profound for a column. Um, Again, a little bit too early to tell, but let's just go ahead and just say that that thing is down there.
Hmm.
What is it? All right. The pyramids, from a young Earth creationist perspective that believes that we have in a 6,000-year timeline where the worldwide flood was, I'm just going to throw this out there, 2348 BC. Okay. Even the
Okay.
Egyptian timeline does not mesh perfectly with the biblical timeline. All right. So that means that limestone, what the majority of the pyramid is built itself, so anything above the ground, okay, is post flood, because that's when the limestone was created, was during the worldwide flood. So post flood, this was created probably shortly after the disbursement in Babel, when Ham and his people went about their business, and
Hmm.
Mizraim
Hmm.
started Egypt, and sometime after that they started constructing these huge edifices. The technology to create them is incredible. Some of the theories, and we'll get to underground in just one second. I just want to touch
Hmm.
real quick
I
on
was I
on
was
what's
going to
above.
go to that. Let's talk about that. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure, there's some. So there are a couple of things that are going on there. One gentleman had a theory that it's geoplasticity or something. What it means is that they took um, limestone, ground it up, and then created forms, that they created a cement block
I heard that.
right
Yeah.
there where they needed it. And that's why they fit so close together. And that's the reason why there's so many of them, and why they were able to manipulate them all the way up to
Uh,
487 feet or whatever. That's one theory.
okay.
The
So
other
they
th-
th- so
other
they
theory,
they poured the cement. They poured the pyramid, basically. Is that what you're saying?
basically, yeah, one
Okay.
by one, and that's how they did that. That was at least one solution to how they did that. This idea of aliens, well, I don't know of any theories, other than maybe something that's been made up in the last 40 or 50 years, that states that aliens were directly involved with the actual building of it. The theory that was popularized by von Daniken in 1969 in Chariots of the Gods states that 35,000 years ago, aliens came down and basically they seeded our genetics to get us out of the cave. And then over the course of 30,000 years with multiple visits, 5,000 years ago, they gave us the technology and said, okay, boys and girls, you're ready. Go for it. And so with that technology, they were able to do some of these incredible buildings that we see around the world, but have lost that technology shortly afterwards. Now there's another group of people that believe in this Younger Dryas catastrophe thing that happened 11, 12,000 years ago that sounds very much like the worldwide flood. They're vying to bring back the building of like the Sphinx and Gobekli Tepe, 10,000, 12,000 years ago that these buildings were created then, which is outside the biblical timeline. Okay, but they're not claiming to be Christians. They're not claiming to follow Genesis literally.
Yeah.
So then you got the young earth creationists that have a very restrictive timeline. But Dr. Carl Baugh from the Creation Evidence Museum down in Glen Rose, Texas, wrote in one of his books that he's calculating the IQ of early man. And he said that the antediluvians, that is Adam and Eve onward to Noah and his family, had an average IQ of anywhere between 400 to 700 IQ. 130 generations since Adam, it seems like there'd be more, and 1% degradation in the genome when it replicates itself. He uses that formula and other mathematics and biology to simulate a theory that. So what does that mean? That means those fresh off the boat, those fresh off even of Babel, had incredible intelligence. Okay? And as I believe, we were originally created more than twice as tall as we are today. And a lot of people challenge me on that as far as where you're getting that. Well, this Saturday on Facebook at 9 a.m., if you don't mind me doing a little plug here, I'm going to answer some of those questions as to where do you come up with that idea. So just humor me just for a second. Let's just say that Noah and his kids and his wives were 10 and 12 feet tall. Giants, if they're genetic, are extremely strong. I mean, exponentially strong. I'll give you one example. Angus McGaskill from Nova Scotia back in the mid-1800s was a genetic giant of 7'10". And he one time on a bet lifted a 2,200 pound anchor on his shoulder and walked the pier with it. You can lift 2,200 pounds if you got it underneath your back and you just, real quick lift with your legs. But to put that up on your shoulder and then walk with it, that's another story. So, there's examples of that. So here's the deal. Who were the ones that built the pyramids? Who were the ones that built some of these oldest, edifices throughout the world? The legends of the local areas like Baalbek and even Stonehenge, and I believe even in Egypt, there's the whispering of giant humans. Well, that would make sense if our ancestors, for a while after the flood, were still super large. That means we have genius giants at the helm of creating these edifices.
Yeah. So just to get back, you're going to be speaking to this at 9 o'clock when? Saturday night?
Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Lost World Museum Facebook.
All right. So
page.
if you're hearing some of these things for the first time and you're kind of scratching your head and you're kind of getting a little bit like, what are they talking about? Look,
right.
You just need to listen. Check it out. The world is bigger. There's more out there than you might think. We tend to box our world in something very small. Sometimes we box God in a very small package as well. But God is bigger and the world is bigger than you may realize. So, John, going back to the pyramids and what they found underneath, what are you? When you have first heard of this, and I'm sure you looked into it, what were you thinking this is? What's this in your mind? We're just speculating, but I'm just curious.
No, I know. I don't know. The pyramid itself is colossal, and it's got 2.5 ton stones, 2 million of them or whatever, and then they've got the 70 70-ton stones that are like way up, 200-300 feet in the air. I mean, that alone was spectacular. But to think that they have something weird, something unusual, a structure going underground that deep, tells me that well, could you say that it's on another level, or would you say that it's in keeping with what we're seeing above the level? I, it's so early to tell, and I know that people are jumping on this. It's so early to tell without further investigation. I mean, their equipment may have registered with something that isn't really there. It's possible, and it really is possible that that could possibly be the what's happening here. Um,
So they could be wrong.
yeah, they could be wrong. I don't want them to be wrong or right. I just want to
Hmm.
know what the truth is, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah. I think for me, here's my thing as I think about this. When obviously this is the year 2025, and when we're thinking about structures and these things, and especially now, I've watched so many sci-fi movies that as soon as I hear this stuff, I see science, tech, engines, warp drive. I mean, just all sorts of things. The struggle that or the thing that I always come back to is this: if they were so, and I believe they were advanced in the past, but if they were so advanced, why is it that they were making things with rocks, stones, when today we have all sorts of materials? What do they call it? The carbon, the
Sure.
yeah, just
The di-
even the different metals and all the
the
different compounds.
microchip, the
Yeah,
diode, we
right.
got
And
all those.
so we look back and we see it's like they were building. I mean, it's still impressive, but they were still building things with rocks. So I struggle with. I believe they were advanced, but so that's for me when I hear some of this stuff. It seems I create a little tension in my own mind trying to really understand it.
Yeah.
Have you struggled
Um,
with that at all?
I would like to see more of the technology show up or evidences of it. I mean, what do the Egyptians leave us with? They leave us like, I think, two hieroglyphs that show that some of these blocks were moved on sleds with lots of people. And yet, we see cut marks that some people try to replicate and debate that it's nothing more than just copper saws with water or sand or cloth and sand to polish,
Wow,
but it looks like it's vitrified. You know what I mean? And some of these cuts look like it's
precision.
been done with a rotary, yeah, a rotary instrument going at high speed. Because when you're talking about rose granite, and you know, well, these people were experts. Okay, where did they learn it from? Well, where did these experts learn it from? I mean, we're going from caveman
Yeah,
to
yeah,
rose granite shining like a mirror and having these multi-ton sarcophaguses or boxes moved in very tight spaces
yeah.
and cut gorgeously. I mean, it's you know, I'll tell you what. When we went to Peru, we were amazed at what we saw. And I remember that there was the Spanish. And by the way, if you go to Peru or any of the Central America or Mexico, you'll see their influence there with a lot of the Catholic churches that they built, huge churches. They knew how to use stone. Okay, let me just be clear about that. Spanish knew how to build, obviously. They knew how to take stone and fashion it the way they needed it. When they landed there originally, early 1500s, and when they saw, I don't know if it was specifically Machu Picchu, I think it was Sacsayhuaman. And when they saw the fortress of Sacsayhuaman, do you know what they said? They said that this was either created by magic or giants.
Mm.
That's what they said. They
Yeah,
couldn't
yeah.
see it any other way.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah.
Magic being high technology,
It is
you know?
amazing. I think it was on one of your videos where I think it was one of your videos where you were showing a stone, the type that was used to build some of these places that you went to, some of these older sites, but it actually looked like it had like it was softened and someone put their hand in it.
Oh,
And
yeah.
there was a handprint in the stone as if someone like swiped a bunch of the stone out. And I remember you referring to the ability to make stone pliable, soft, and to be able to do some of the things they did with it.
Yeah. Was it poured? Was it just were they able to soften it? I don't know. It
Yeah.
seems that way, the way they fit and everything, but they're just so large.
Yeah.
So you got to have super intelligent people and super large people that are at the helm. People would roll their eyes and say, "No, you don't. I get it. I do." But if a 7'10" man can lift a 2,000 pound anchor, which is basically a ton, then what could a contingent of 1,000 men like that with IQs, you know, twice as much, 3 times as much as our IQ be capable of doing if in fact that happened,
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. Uh, so, John, the main reason I wanted to speak with you is of course to talk about this, but it really is to get to the issue that kind of as a pastor, as Christians, you find it. I find it interesting. People are more willing to believe that an alien race seeded and made us. They seeded the earth with what eventually became humans. They will. It's easier for them to believe that we were created by aliens than it is to put a name to that alien. If we say, "Yeah, we were built," and the alien's name is Jesus, no, 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 I don't believe in God. But some unknown alien came, and then they're willing to accept that. And then when we hear and see things like what's happening right now in Egypt with this pyramid and all the speculation, they're saying could be a power plant, an underground city, and what have you. I think about the impact that something like that has on people who are maybe new to the faith, or people who's sometimes they are these are the very things that they use to somehow not believe. And I know you're a Christian, so I guess my question for you is, as you look at not just the pyramid, I know you've been to different parts of the world to look at some of these different things that I think you call them
right?
parts, out of place artifacts and things. But how do you maintain your faith in a world where you see these things coming up? Does it have you had times where you've had to question? Has it strengthened your faith, or how do you deal with it with all of these things as a Christian?
Well, you see, first off, I have a certain framework that I'm looking through it, and everybody does. Don't get it wrong. Don't think that scientists don't have a bias or a framework or a worldview that they're looking through, because they are. That's their job, you know. So, well, you got to understand, in the book Secrets of the Lost Races, Rennie Neuerbergen does a really good job of substituting aliens. Let me just take a step back. The one interesting thing about the alien theory, even though it's from an evolutionary standpoint, is they're honest enough to say that evolution and anthropology does not do a good job explaining some of these things. Not really, because if you look at it real carefully, you realize that there was an advanced race. There's something going on here, and we were 1 foot in the caveman. So, and 1 foot out of the cave. How in the world could those people possibly have done this? So enter in something that has extra force, like an alien. They have power, and they have super intelligence. I'm maintaining that humans had an incredible IQ, were more than twice as tall. They lived 900 years. Wow. Fresh off of the ark, they start dumbing down in size and strength and age. However, not before they went and set things up around the world that kind of defy logic and engineering.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's the substitute for aliens, is genius giants who were us.
Yeah, I think you're saying something interesting, that uh, some people believe that these things somehow argue against a belief in Christianity, but what you're saying, it's your understanding of Christianity that helps you understand this in a way that other people can't
Well,
appreciate.
exactly. And let me just impress one point or part of this. I wasn't looking for this data, but it started to come in, and I didn't realize it until after it came in. What was the scope of things in regards to this? People in other denominations are just touching on some of this stuff. The idea that Adam and Eve were giants is since the 1800s is not something that the modern churches in the last 150 years today look upon. That they think they're 6 feet tall and had 110 IQ, and and even people question whether or not they lived 900 years. So no, The denomination I align myself with, I think, is 100% correct in the idea that we were genius giants, extremely tall, probably good looking, and long lived. And after the world changed, the environment changed, the food stuff changed after the flood, then there
Mhm.
has been some dumbing down since then.
So that's an excellent point. Let me uh, when I first heard this issue about the pyramid, and I
Yeah.
mean, I've done some investigation. I'm no expert by it. I'm not even a little bit. Just some reading, just like anybody else that's curious. But the ages of how long the pyramids have been there, obviously, going back 10. I've heard someone say, no, no, they go back even further. Um, is there, if I said to you that the pyramids were structures left over from before the flood, does that at all? How do you does that make sense at all? It just seems when the does that jive at all with your understanding of things?
The only thing I'd be open to is the possibility that they were somehow able to scrape off the mud off the ground and find that foundation there, and then build the pyramid on top of it. But no, it's limestone. And limestone geologically, from a young Earth perspective, was created during the worldwide flood.
Okay,
So it had to have been formed then and then, used afterwards, after the flood, that is. They would have been able to mine it or harvest it or whatever you want to call it,
right, right,
quarry it, you
okay,
know.
excellent.
But
Yeah,
is the underground thing, if it's true, could it be pre-flood, antediluvian? It's possible. The thing that I'm a pessimist about antediluvian anything is that God wiped this earth so clean and buried everything so well. It's other than the fossils that we find, we rarely find other evidences to the contrary of what paleontologists and piece together.
right. Okay. So John, I wanna ask you to do something for me if you would.
Sure.
I'm thinking about the person who is a Christian. I'm thinking about the person who, is interested in all of these things, but they find that they find their faith frankly challenged. If it's believing in a young Earth theory, or just believing in our origins, that we say God, they say Romulans or whatever. Um, and
Yeah.
they find that they're going to school. Maybe it's a young person. They're going to school in science class and hearing things. Um, you're one that's been you've looked at a lot of these things that many people don't look at. That people
Right.
would say it's kind of little odd, it's strange science or whatever. But sometimes that's what they lean on to say, I don't want to be a Christian because of this. What would you say as words of encouragement to that individual?
Yeah. I don't know if I can speak directly to them, but I'm going to tell you a little quick story. We had at one time wanted to make Secrets of the Lost Races into some kind of documentary. And we brought on a student from SU that had film capabilities. He also majored in history. Okay. He's not a Christian. So we brought him in and we were all sitting around discussing this project. I handed him a copy of Secrets of the Lost Races. Now, I got to understand, this guy's a history major. He's heard a lot of stuff going through Syracuse University. When he completed the book and when we met shortly after that, his remark was, guys, I'm going to have to rethink everything that I learned.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, yeah. I
So for somebody like that has a major in history who has no interest in the Bible to read that book, which exemplifies what we've been talking about here today, and for that to make that kind of impact, it was no Fruit Loop theory. It was the truth, and that's the reason why it struck so deeply with him. That's my take.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, that's I think about the impact that this has on people who have only heard about God and the Bible, but have never really read the Bible themselves. You know,
Yeah,
for me, if anyone out there is seeing these things and somehow struggling, somehow seeing Christianity as, these were the people that martyred people that said that the earth revolved around the sun. There was a time when the church was anti science, and that they were punishing people that said different than what the church said. And even today, people think that the church, quote unquote, is still like that. Um,
Right.
you need to be a student of the Bible. You need to
Yeah.
read the Bible. You know, in case you don't know, and I'm speaking to you, if you're kind of, if I'm describing you, this is a reason why you maybe feel like this is why I don't want to believe. In the Bible, you're going to read about, and John was just referring to this, men that lived not 70, 80 years, but 700, 800 years, 900 plus years. Incredible strength, incredible intelligence. You're going to read about things that maybe in today we would call supernatural. You're going to read about a meeting that took place not on earth, in front of God, and the Bible says there were representatives, and one came from the earth, which by the way was a bad guy. It was the devil himself. But you're going to read about fantastical things that are going to make you see the Bible in a different way. These things should not alter your faith. If anything, if you read the Bible, you might find a different way of looking at it that may strengthen your faith. Now, I wanna end the podcast with a little bit of my own, a little bit another story similar to kind of what you told, but
Sure.
this is just a general story for people. This story comes from the Bible. The Bible tells a story of a king who was very full of himself. This king thought that he was God. And this king had received repeated warnings from a prophet saying, God wants you to be humble. If you don't humble yourself, God is going to do it. So please be humble. Please don't think so much of yourself. And if you go to Berlin, in their museum there is remnants of the part of his city, the Ishtar Gate, the Babylonian Ishtar Gate. I've seen it. It's baked blue marble, and it's got depictions of what I call dragons, and they have lions there. And there's this plate it's in this ancient writing. It had to be translated, but it's translated in both in German and English. And it is this king, his name was Nebuchadnezzar. He said, I have built this for my great glory, for my great honor. And this was actually baked in some of the marbles, similar to what we do today when we build a building. We put a cornerstone with the year that it was built in. This was there. And here's what happened. The Bible tells us that he listened for a time, but he couldn't keep it in too long and went too far. I want to share one Bible verse with you because this is interesting. In Daniel 4:17, an angel came and told him, "You are now going to be punished. You think you're a god? You're going to spend the next 7 years acting like living like an animal." But he says this is what I find interesting. The sentence that was decreed on him says, "The sentence is by the decree of the watchers, the decision by the word of the holy ones, to the end that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will." Now, many pastors, we share this verse and we say the purpose of punishing Nebuchadnezzar was to show Nebuchadnezzar and those who would come afterwards that God is the real king. And it's true. But there's something in here that we gloss over. It says, "This is the decree of the watchers, the word of the holy ones." You know what that tells me? What that tells me is that we are this world that we see, that there's more to it. That we're being watched. That there's things outside of our reality that interacts with us. The Bible talks about angels. The Bible talks about watchers. They watch, they keep track of things, and sometimes they act. This world is larger than you may think. The world is bigger than you may think. Because there are things you don't understand, you may want to somehow have less faith in God. But the very book that was sent to tell us about God tells us that the world is larger than you understand. So when you don't understand things, hey, the Bible said this is the case, right? It kind of stink if we understood everything. There'd be nothing more to explore. So I want to encourage you today. If you are experiment, study, ask all the questions you want, but don't exclude the Bible in your research. Don't judge the Bible by what Hollywood or popular talk show hosts have to say about it. John, is there anything you want to add before we close the podcast?
No, I think we did a fair job of trying to lay that all out as far as what we can tell at this point. So,
Right now, John, real quickly for those again, your podcast or your it's not podcast. You're putting out these videos, but your next live
yeah,
is when?
it's going to be this Saturday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can just look us up on Lost World Museum on Facebook, and you'll be able to find all sorts of goodies there.
So you're on Facebook, you're on YouTube, correct?
We're on YouTube as well too. And if you go to lostworldmuseum.com, we have one of those link trees that gives you a few links to a few of the things that we do, including our store if you want to rummage around there as well.
Well, thank you, John. I appreciate you all the time when you come on.
Oh, this was fun. Love it. Can't
And
wait till they find out more
I
information
know
about that.
that's going to be
exciting.
great. It
Yeah.
is exciting. I'm interested to see what's going to happen there. All right.
Mm.
Well, thank you for joining me, John. Thank you for being a part of the My Take family, folks. We will see you next time.